continuing this My Type series on the Enneagram. And as you saw in the video, there are 9 types of the Enneagram. It's a way of understanding our different personality makeups. It's hundreds of years old. It's developed over time. And so we're covering 2 types a week. And this week we're covering types 5 and 6. And our goal for the series is that by learning about your unique personality makeup, you would be equipped to be able to grow in spiritual formation, to grow as a person closer to God, as a better person in general. As we learn this information, it's kind of like this customized spiritual growth plan for each of us. And as we talk about 5s and 6s today, this is true every week, but the struggles that 5 and 6s have are struggles that are common to all people. And so you may have nothing to do with a 5 and 6 as far as your Enneagram number, but the challenges that 5s and 6s face are going to speak to you today, if you're open to that. Definitely to me, and I think they're just common to all people, so we're all going to benefit today. So we're going to give some basic info about each type today, and then we'll kind of slow it down and unpack it. So you ready to get to it? All right, here we go. Let's talk about 5s, the investigator. 5s are alert, insightful, and curious. They're able to concentrate and focus on developing complex ideas and skills. These are the scientists, the strategists, the inventors, the logical thinkers in our society. They're able to observe a large amount of information, collect it and synthesize it and make sense of it. That's a 5. And because I think 5s are more logical, they're these thinkers. They're not swayed by the social mores of the time to make them think differently. They're independent thinkers. I think 5s can have an awkward relationship with religion. Can I get an amen, any 5s? If you're willing to speak up in a church service, 5s. Because, for example, Pastor Aaron's leading a one group that's awesome, and it's bursting at the seams on Thursday nights using this book, The Enneagram, A Christian Perspective. It's co-written by a Catholic priest who's an amazing author, Richard Rohr, and a co-author. And as I was reading the description of a 5 in this book, I'm like, I think a 5 broke up with one of these authors at some point because, it's just kind of harsh. It's like the treatment of 5s is just a little harsh in this book. And I have no idea. Wondering, though, is it because 5s tend to have the most interesting relationship with religion? And of course, the co-author's a priest. I don't know. But it's just something that's true about 5s, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. The basic fear of a 5 is being useless, helpless, or incapable. And so their desire to remedy that fear is to be a capable and competent person. The basic struggle of a 5 is greed. And that doesn't necessarily mean financial greed. It means the tendency to store up knowledge and to collect knowledge and maybe not share it. Is that interesting? That the 5 wants to understand the world more and more about it, but may not actually have the desire to share that information. So 5s may have amazing insights that nobody hears. And so it's just a basic struggle is opening up and sharing those insights. The wings, not everybody has a wing. You don't have to have a wing, by the way, in the Enneagram. If you do, it's going to be one number to the right or left of you. But the Enneagram 5 with a 4 wing is the iconoclast. The Enneagram 5 with a 6 wing is the problem solver. You could read more about that in this book or at enneagraminstitute.com or other websites. So we're just kind of speeding through some information. Healthy, average, and unhealthy type 5s. A healthy 5, what we strive for as a 5. 5s can become visionaries, broadly comprehending the world while getting involved with it profoundly. Open-minded, they take things in whole, in their true context. They see the world as it is. But they can also make pioneering discoveries and find entirely new ways of doing and perceiving things. It's an awesome power. 5s are incredibly powerful people if they're willing to unleash that. An average 5, they begin conceptualizing and fine-tuning everything before acting, working things out in their minds, model building, preparing, practicing, analysis, gathering more resources, studious, and they acquire technique. They can become specialized. They can in a certain area, and they're just experts there, and they're highly intellectual. and they can challenge accepted ways of doing things. An unhealthy 5 can become reclusive and isolated from reality, eccentric and even nihilistic, just feeling empty and withdrawn from society, highly unstable and fearful of aggressions. They reject and repulse others and all social attachments. That's a very unhealthy 5. So for every type, there's this process whereby we become more healthy, whole people, and that's why we're doing this series. Here's some famous 5s. They're not on the screen, but I'll read them. The Buddha. Not bad, right? Albert Einstein. John Nash from the movie A Beautiful Mind. Stephen Hawking. Van Gogh. George O'Keeffe. Salvador Dali. Emily Dickinson. Nietzsche. Agatha Christie, James Joyce, John Paul Sartre, Susan Sontag, Stephen King, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jane Goodall, Eckhart Tolle, Meredith Monk, Kurt Cobain, Peter Gabriel, Laurie Anderson, Jane Seabury, Trent Reznor, Tom York from Radiohead. It's a great band right there. Hitchcock, Marlene Dietrich, Tim Burton, Jodie Foster, Annie Leibovitz, Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks guy, Aaron Schwartz. So you kind of get, does that help? Get an idea of a 5. So 5s are people who want to possess knowledge. They want to understand their environment as it really is. They want to see the world as it really is. And they want to have everything figured out and to understand the world deeply, to be able to not only see it, but to understand how all of the parts work together. Now, our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness. So if we're able to see all of these things and pursue knowledge, and our minds are always going all the time, then that can make social interaction a challenge for some 5s. Not all 5s, but for some. Because if your mind is always going, it's just like your mind is just collecting stimuli all the time, and you're in a social situation where there are a lot of bells and whistles and conversations and small talk that you might find boring. That can be draining, can it? Any 5s relate to that? And so a growth invitation for a 5 is to engage with their social environment a little bit more. So obviously this plays into relationships that we'll talk about in a second, but here's a quick video about 5s. So you kind of get an idea of what how a 5 could struggle in relationships. 5s, like everyone, want to love and be loved. 5s can be amazing spouses, partners, friends, but because they're collecting knowledge continually, can make those social relationships a little more difficult. And so therefore the central fear of a 5 is that they won't be able to emotionally give people what they want. Like there's this fear that people want more from me emotionally than what I'm really able to give them. So 5 search for a mind mate. Sharing knowledge is hot to a 5. Right? If just having a good deep talk about some information, that's attractive to a 5. That's the way 5s connect with others, especially in intimate relationships. 5 values, oh my gosh. Read it for yourself. I give up. So they can seem distant in relationships. Again, we kind of talked about that, how, it's this central fear of a 5 that, hey, if you're in my area of expertise, I can go all day about this, but if you're wanting me to just give and give and give emotionally, that can be tough for me. And I might not be able to respond emotionally the way you want me to. I know 5s who are pastors, who are deeply spiritual people, but struggle because pastors are supposed to be really emotional people. You see what I'm saying? They want a pastor who makes them feel good. But if you have a lot of knowledge, well, we need that desperately in the religious world we live in. But a lot of times people just kind of want to feel good, and so a 5 might feel like, man, I can't give people what they want. I need a little bit of distance, I need a little reflection time, and so that can be a central struggle for a 5. So if you're a 5 and you want to improve in your marriage, your friendships, one way to do that is to get more in touch with your physical body and with your emotions at any moment. 5s live in an abstract world of theories and thoughts. They're not always thinking about what's going on in the here and now. It was said that Einstein, at least one time, walked out of his house forgetting to put his pants on. Right? So deep, can you imagine? So deep in walking down the street, he's coming up with a theory of relativity. He's changing the world. He's just naked, So socially, that could be a little awkward. But the challenge is to become more aware of what's going on around me. I've told you part of my story before. I can see 5 tendencies in me for sure. I'm sure you can too. And I went to mandatory counseling in seminary. I've told this story before, and I had a classic problem that not just fives have, that many of you might be able to relate to. I was just cut off between my head and my heart. You know what I'm talking about? I was able to think about things, I was able to analyze, but I wasn't really able to feel. I wasn't in touch with my emotions. And people might make fun of that, and the cliches, feel your feelings, or, get in touch with your feelings, but I wasn't, and I needed to, desperately. Because if you're really going to succeed in any kind of relationship in your life, you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to access your own emotions, to know what you're feeling in any given moment, and be able to connect with other people. And the counselor gave me this homework that's kind of embarrassing, but it was amazing. She said, I just want you to go throughout your day. It doesn't matter if you're driving, if you're at work, whatever you're doing, occasionally throughout the day I want you to stop and say, how do I feel right now and why? And so I did that. Like a good studious person. Again, I can identify with fives in some ways. And I remember sitting in a red light. And I was like, how do I feel right now and why? And I was all keyed up and anxious, stressed and kind of angry. I'm like, why do I feel like that? I'm like, morning? Was it something happened this morning? I think I was on my way to work. I'm like, no, nothing really bad happened. Why do I feel like that? I felt like that last night too. Why? I don't know. I just started retracing steps. If you lose something, you retrace your steps to find your keys. And I feel like this a lot. I feel stressed and anxious and fearful. Why do I feel like that so much? Can anybody identify with such feelings? And that exercise of just going throughout my day gave me huge insight into my own emotional life, into how I was dealing with stress, things that happened to me a long time ago, how I felt about my life right then. In any given moment, I could be in a conversation with somebody completely cut off from my emotions, and I could come off as agitated, not even realize it, and it has nothing to do with that person. So they're thinking, why is he kind of agitated? Is it me? Which makes social interaction awkward. But it has nothing to do with that person. It has something 10 years ago. Unresolved business, that I just wasn't aware of emotionally. So this can be a struggle for fives, but, I come out as a 3 on the test. I think it's a struggle for 3s. I think it's a struggle for all 9, actually. To be connected between our heads and our hearts, to our physical bodies, and to be aware of our emotions at any moment. That's a growing edge for a 5, especially in relationships. Okay, career. There are lots of careers that 5s can excel in because of their gifts. Risk management, they can see problems coming and strategize. Chemical or electrical engineer, architect, engineer, astronomer, physicist, environmental planner, game designer, medical researcher, professor, software designer. Again, just creating something from scratch. Poof. You just see a picture in their heads, how all the moving parts come together and create it. Tech support, web developer, web designer, database administrator. And again, 5s can be absolutely stellar in one of these areas. And if you're a 5, see if this kind of describes your experience. 5s can be most frustrated in their careers because of the social interaction required to get ahead in a career. See what I'm saying? A lot of times, who gets the promotion depends on who is liked, not who's the best at it. That never happens, right? And so you realize, even in a work environment, even if I'm amazing at what I do, I still have to grease the social wheels. People still have to like me. I still have to kind of schmooze and do that thing in order to be successful in my career. A lot of times a 5 can be frustrated because they feel like they're being looked over, like they're not being appreciated for who they are and what they have to give. That may be true. That can happen. Other people may not truly understand your thoughts because you're so far ahead of them, frankly. And so you have to kind of grease the wheels and cozy up to folks and even in your career and build those relationships as well. If a 5 is able to do that, to unleash their knowledge and creativity and be able to navigate through relationships, a 5 can be an incredibly successful person. Mark Zuckerberg is an example of a 5. Mark Zuckerberg is the creator of Facebook. It rivals Google every day with the most accessed website in the world. His net worth is about $35 billion. Everybody here, I'm sure, is on Facebook. He's changed the world and how people communicate. So if a 5 who has all this knowledge is willing to engage, share their ideas, and it's social media. So a 5 who might find social interaction a challenge has changed the way people socialize. Isn't that cool? But if a 5 can unleash those gifts and have that kind of success, if you consider 35 billion to be successful. Moving on to spiritual life. All of this fits into the spiritual life of a 5 as well. 5s have a couple of main challenges and growth opportunities. The first is to connect with a community that is comfortable with your doubts. I wonder where you would find one of those. Because 5s are thinkers, observers, they're not dependent on social interaction to tell them what to think. They're willing to step back and think for themselves and be free thinkers. As we said earlier, they can have an awkward relationship with religion. There are probably more 5 atheists and agnostics than any other type. 5s often struggle with questions, with what they see around them. Had a conversation with a 5 yesterday morning who's an agnostic and said, and I mean, to be honest with you, it was kind of, I could feel the awkwardness because he wasn't sure he could trust me because he knew I was a pastor. As soon as he found that out, like things got a little weird. And so he was like, sorry, man, don't want to offend you. You know, he was kind of bracing me for what he was going to say. He's like, I think a lot of churches are pretty much just like right-wing political groups who are more about politics than anything else. They just kind of use religion to get what they want in society. You think he's the only person in the world that feels like that? Right? Do you think he might be right in some ways? You guys awake? You here? Okay. I know that's the case because I know everybody here. And so you don't have to be a 5 to see this struggle with religion and society and how it all plays together. And so you can have somebody who grows up in this conservative Christian home, and maybe they're a 5, or maybe they're just a deeply thoughtful person. And they start having all these questions in this crisis of faith because they start seeing things as they really are. And that can be really hard for a 5. If that's you, you need a place where you can say that stuff out loud and not be kicked out into the back alley. And hopefully One Church is a friendly place for you. Hopefully we're a church, one of the few probably, that is friendly to 5s, where you can connect with people, whether it's a 1 group, whether it's just, drinking coffee and shooting the breeze before the service, or whatever it is, where you can connect with people and actually say the things you're thinking out loud, to get it out. And not just keep your knowledge to yourself, but actually say it and know that not only are you allowed to say it, but you're actually welcome to say it. We want you to say it. Does that make sense? We want you to share your journey, your questions, your doubts with us, because we believe it'll make our community better. And then lastly, perhaps an invitation for spiritual growth for a 5 is to adopt the incarnation as your model. Incarnation is the doctrine that Jesus has always existed. That Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Trinity, that Jesus is the second person of the Trinity, has always existed before he was born on earth. And the incarnation means to put flesh on. You see carne in there, to put flesh on. And so Jesus was born as a human. I mean, it's the belief, right? The theological belief. Jesus was born as a human and entered into the human experience in a physical, tangible, everyday, real-world way. In Philippians 2, we read this: in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage or grasped. Rather, he made himself nothing, by taking the very nature of a servant and being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. He had all this, he was in his ivory tower, and he had all the knowledge and power in the world, but he was willing to humble himself, empty himself, and give of himself. It's called kenosis, emptying, self-emptying, giving of himself as a human being. Therefore, and he became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name that we sang about earlier, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, of the glory of God the Father. Jesus rolled up his sleeves and got involved in the real world. And that's the invitation to a 5. You have gifts, you have knowledge, all of this understanding. You see things that a lot of other people, frankly, just don't see or don't want to see. And we need 5s who are willing to use the incarnation as a model and get involved, which is tough for you to do sometimes. But to get involved and share what you have. There are lots of ways to do that. Again, it could be a one group. It could just be having coffee and sharing ideas. A 5 reached out to me yesterday just to talk about, stuff and the Enneagram. And it could be serving opportunities. We had some technical issues, so we don't have a serving graphic. But this coming Friday is a serving opportunity at the Chandler Christian Community Center, the third Friday of every month. And then the fourth Saturday of the month, we serve at Andre House now, which is a Catholic, basically soup kitchen in downtown Phoenix. That may be a way to get physically, tangibly involved. It would be good for a 5. It's good for everybody, right? But there are serving opportunities, and we want to add to that. We want to be a church that doesn't just stay in our heads, but we want to live through our hands and our feet, you know what I'm saying? And get involved in the world. That's an invitation for everybody, not just the 5. All right, 6s. Moving on. Like 5s, 6s are head types. They step back and observe the world around them to make sense of it. And 2, 3s, and 4s look for validation outside of themselves. If I'm truly a 3, I base my own identity on what I think you think about me, which I'm probably doing right now during a sermon. If you're a 5, 6, or 7, you're basing your identity on stepping back and observing what you see. Do you see the difference there? It's a big difference. So like 5s, 6s step back and observe. They may hide their true feelings. They may not be aware of them, as we said earlier. But what people see on the outside in a 6 is a clear, convinced, in-control person. 6s can be really sociable. They can be like just people magnets. But inwardly, they can feel confused and insecure. So here's some basic info about 6s. They're committed, security-oriented types. They're reliable, hardworking, responsible, and trustworthy. Excellent troubleshooters. They can see problems and fix them. They can foster cooperation between people. The basic fear of a 6 is being without support and guidance. See if you can kind of get a feel for a 6. They fear being without support and security and guidance. Like there's this inner anxiety in a 6, wondering if things are okay and if they're going to be okay. Basic desire is to have that security and support, and the basic struggle is fear. This sense of anxiety that the world is kind of a cruel place, a mysterious place, and I can kind of feel like that inside sometimes too, and so I'm looking for things that I can hold on to that are solid and stable in this world. That's a 6. If a 6 has a wing, 6 with a 5 wing is the defender, a 6 with a 7 wing is the buddy. Healthy, average, and unhealthy. We're just speeding through, and we're going to unpack it here in a second. A healthy 6 becomes self-affirming, trusting of self and others, independent, yet symbiotically interdependent and cooperative as an equal. 6s have this inner anxiety, and so they want to reach out and cooperate. Safety in numbers. It's that kind of a vibe for a 6. And their belief in themselves leads to true courage, positive thinking, leadership, and rich self-expression. Average, they start investing their time and energy in whatever they believe will be safe and stable. Organizing and structuring, they look to alliances and authorities for security and continuity, constantly vigilant, anticipating problems. An unhealthy 6, you see that anxiety start to take over. They fear that they've ruined their security. They become panicky, volatile, and self-disparaging with inferiority feelings. They feel defenseless, so they seek out stronger authority or belief to resolve their problems. And this can lead to religious fundamentalism. If I feel such a sense of anxiety inside that I feel like I have nothing to hold on to inside, I can reach out. You see how this works? I can reach out to something outside of me and grab a hold of it and say, no, that's the truth. Black or white, that's right, that's wrong. And I'm going to hold on to that at all costs. And you can see how a 6 could be pulled toward fundamentalism. Here are some famous 6s: Brahms, Mark Twain, Sigmund Freud, J. Edgar Hoover, Nixon. You can already see like the healthy and unhealthy. Robert F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, George H.W. Bush, Princess Diana, Prince Harry, Tolkien, John Grisham, Mike Tyson, Springsteen, Bono, Melissa Etheridge, Eminem, Oliver Stone, Michael Moore, Spike Lee, Marilyn Monroe, De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. Anybody remember those guys? Feel the Vibrations. Woody Allen, Diane Keaton, Mel Gibson, Sally Field, Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan. I mean, there's some seriously famous people here, right? Julia Roberts, Jennifer Aniston, Ellen Page, Paul Rudd, Sarah Jessica Parker, Ben Affleck, Hugh Laurie, Katie Holmes, Letterman, Leno, Ellen DeGeneres, Katie Couric, Rush Limbaugh, Chris Rock, Larry David, fictional character, Seinfeld's George Costanza. How's that for a self-esteem booster for you? So you get an idea of kind of 6s, right? Healthy and unhealthy. Julia Roberts, Bono, right? But you also have some people in here who were, pretty unhealthy, paranoid people. So you have the full range there. So sixes want to have security, and they look for security and to relieve this sense of anxiety by kind of wrapping their arms around other people, and by getting involved in the things that are fear-inducing in the world and trying to solve them. So you can have really great activistic people, Bono, doing awesome things in the world, but they're driven by this inner sense of anxiety, and the world's not as it should be. And so, what can I do to jump in and be, the solution to the problem? Here's a short video about sixes. Are sixes the only people that struggle with those feelings? So again, we can all grow from these things. So sixes in relationships, they long for reassurance of their partner's love, and may project their own feelings onto their partners. So sixes are motivated by this deep anxiety. So they question whether or not their partner really loves them. They may read into nonverbals things that aren't really there. They may be a little sensitive and try to read between the lines. And if you're married to a six, or you have a good friend who's a six, you may feel like they're kind of sensitive. And you might have to just kind of adjust and help them to understand that I love you no matter what, and it's unconditional, and give them feedback, because they're always looking for that feedback to see how other people feel about them. And if you're a six, you want to watch out that you're not reading into things too much. Really look for facts. What's really going on? A five would be really good at that. What's really going on? So kind of develop that strength instead of just the inner anxiety. When sixes feel this fear, this anxiety, they may not want to own it. So a six can project their feelings onto their partner. And this is really important. And sixes aren't the only people who do this, all right? So this is worth the price of admission right here in the next couple of minutes, whether you're a six or not, because this is super important. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you think that person doesn't love you enough, or you think that person's not trustworthy, you think that person's not telling you the whole truth, whatever it is, all right, here's something to ask yourself. Now, you might be right, okay? So we want to test reality. We want to live in the real world here, but this is extremely important whether you're a six or not. Something you want to ask yourself. I think that they feel that way, or that they're acting towards me in a certain way. Is it possible that that's actually the way I feel, and I'm projecting that onto them? This is a psychological phenomenon called projection. Everybody does it. There's no way of even stopping it. You just try to catch it and be aware of it. If I think my partner thinks about me in a certain way, it could be a coworker, it could be a boss, and I think that person sees me a certain way, and it could be that that's what you're doing, actually. Does anybody know what I'm talking about here? And you can project that onto that person. It's just an incredibly interesting thing that humans do. And so the qualities that you see in other people might actually be yours. This is such a revelation when we really get a hold of this. And so sixes can do that. Sixes are maybe more prone to it than other people. You can see, in a really unhealthy person, self-hatred, self-loathing, religious fundamentalism, right? I hate myself, I think I'm bad, therefore I project that into the world, and all of a sudden we're flying airplanes into buildings because we think other people are bad. That's the extreme, unhealthy, obviously, manifestation of that. But we all have that projection that we need to deal with in our lives. So grow in your trust of others. You are far more likable and lovable than you realize. And if you feel a certain way, own it and explore that. Is it really me? And explore that. I want you to see two sixes interacting with each other. Of course, Letterman retired a few weeks ago after 33 years? Was that right? 33 years in TV? And Julia Roberts was a frequent guest on his show. And there was always a lot of flirtation between Letterman and Julia Roberts, but they're both sixes. They probably just, got along really well together. She was on his show like 25, 26 times. And this is a clip that's maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, and I want you to see how two sixes interact with each other, and see if you can pick up on the insecurity and the self-loathing and the fear and the anxiety in sixes. Check this out. Fear, and he talks about self-loathing, and she's afraid, she's insecure about this, and he's like, what's wrong with me, right? Just two sixes in conversation. So moving on here, relationships. So we're looking to develop a sense of trust in other people and to realize our own strengths and giftedness so we're not feeling such a sense of anxiety. Career. 6s can make great paralegals, elementary school teachers, childcare workers, administrative assistant, secretary, credit loans officer, counselor, security guard, financial aid counselor. See a lot of people work here. Scientist, also some analysis, health and safety inspector, banker, technical support, insurance underwriter, looking for risk, right? What's wrong with the world and trying to fix that are good career paths for 6s in a spiritual lives. 6s, here's some tips. We'll go through these quicker than it looks like. Learn to be present in your anxiety. Like, oh my gosh, a 5-point sermon coming up at me right now. Learn to be present in your anxiety. Challenge self-doubt and overreaction. And so those two things, again, it's kind of like 5s. How do I feel right now and why? If I feel anxious, why do I feel that way? Is Letterman really going to skewer me? Am I that bad, right? Do I really need to be fearful about this situation? What's the reality on the ground here? Do I need to feel as anxious as I do? Try to test that against reality and own it, not try to project it on the other people, but I feel this way, and here's why. And that in itself does challenge self-doubt and overreaction, because I can react to the way things really are. 6s, like 5s and 7s, can see the interconnectedness of all things. That's an awesome spiritual gift. To be able to see, when you look out into the world, and this is probably true of a 6, you're bothered by the things you see. Is that true of 6s? And even if you're not a 6, you're just kind of bothered by the things you see. Like, why? There's so much suffering. It's like Aaron's prayer earlier, suffering and violence and just continual war. And I remember Francis Schaeffer saying, humans are like semi-evolved primates, just chest beating all the time. And there's so much pain in the world. 6s can see how all that fits together. Julia Roberts made Erin Brockovich. You know that story? Where she kind of stands up against this company that's acting unjustly. And you see that, and it's an incredible strength because you can see how love and compassion can be connected to this world, and how you can remedy the problems that you see, and how Scripture can be a guide, and seeking time-tested guidance. How, what about societies before? 6s can be history buffs. How do they deal with these problems? And you can look for guidance and wisdom from other cultures, different religions, the past, Scripture, and you can bring that to bear on the world, and you can become active for the causes you believe in and do amazing things. Again, Bono, somebody like that who's alleviated so much poverty in the world. A great verse for 6s is from Philippians, another Philippians verse, and it's actually the one written on the coffee counter. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Easier said than done, right? But instead of being fearful and full of anxiety, worry is a choice. Instead of choosing to worry, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to present my request to God in prayer. God, I feel anxious about this. Here's how I feel. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of ruminating in that anxiety and worry, I'm going to choose to present my request to God. Both are actions. I can choose to worry. I can choose to pray. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Some of us walked in here being very discouraged from things that happened this week. Or maybe over a long period of time. Maybe you're troubled by the things you see in the world. Maybe it was a rough week in general, and you know why, and there are bigger things connected to that. And you're tempted to be anxious and fearful. You're tempted to be drawn into negative thinking and to kind of ruminate and be discouraged. These are choices. Instead of doing that, present your requests to God. And then choose to look for things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, and think about those things. This is meditation, isn't it? So this is prayer and meditation. I'm going to choose to not just focus on painful, discouraging things that have happened to me. I'm going to choose to look for true, noble, right, pure, lovely things, and I'm going to think about those things. Those are actions. I don't have to be controlled by my worry and my fear, but I can choose to present my request to God and choose to think about those things. And I can become active in the causes that I believe in. I'm going to close with this story. It's an inspirational story, and it's contemporary. It's a story that a lot of people don't know. It's about a Roman Catholic priest named Oscar Romero. Has anybody heard of Oscar Romero? Awesome, a few. Awesome. Oscar Romero became Archbishop of El Salvador in 1977. And at this time, El Salvador was descending into civil war. And essentially what was happening is the wealthy elites were controlling the military, and they were just attacking most of the people in the country, the peasant population, the poor folks of the country, doing incredibly unjust things. And when Romero became archbishop, he was like a black and white, this is the way it is, card-carrying company man for the Roman Catholic Church. He was just, whatever the church says, that's what I'm going to do. A 6, and looking for that outside authority. But what happened was the military, in this brazen act, murdered a Jesuit priest and an altar boy. Just killed them. And Romero tried to get into the building, and they wouldn't even let him in. And he realized, later he actually called this his conversion. He realized that the way I've been operating in the world, like black and white, and everything's so neat and tidy, and a nice little bow tied on it, and I just do whatever I'm told to do, that doesn't work. That's not real to life. I'm going to have to deal with life as it really is. And this is an inspiring story. Romero decided, I am going to be a champion for the people of El Salvador. And it doesn't matter what happens to me. I am going to do what's right. And so he started speaking out against this corrupt government, against the military. His weekly sermons were the most broadcast thing in the entire country. And you just hear them echoing, from the houses and the public buildings. And every week he just preached about justice and righteousness and getting active and doing what is right in the world. And he was 60 years old at that time. It's never too late. 60 is really not that old anymore, but it's still a good reminder, it's never too late. You could be cruising along in this way most of your life, and all of a sudden you decide, that's not working anymore. And so he started criticizing the actions of these wealthy elites and of the military. And it became increasingly clear that he would face the same fate as that Jesuit priest, an altar boy. He knew it was coming. And it proved to be true on March 24th, 1980. He was shot during a sermon by these military agents who were working for this corrupt government. 80,000 people attended his funeral. 80,000. During the funeral, the military killed 39 people just for showing devotion to Romero. And now he's been a divisive figure in the Catholic world, but that's becoming less the case. The people of El Salvador have always considered him to be a saint. He's, Saint, Romero to them. But he was declared a martyr by Pope Francis this past February, and then he was beatified on May 23rd of this year, kind of on his way towards that position of honor and sainthood. And so there's this picture of a mural painted about Romero. Now, my Spanish is not that great, but this is part of what's on this wall here is part of the quote I'm going to read. I want you to listen to this 6 who, talk about overcoming anxiety and fear. This guy is a champ right here. Listen to this. I have frequently been threatened with death. I must say that as a Christian, I do not believe in death, but in resurrection. If they kill me, I shall rise in the Salvadoran people. That's not a fearful person anymore. He says, I am not boasting. I say it with the greatest humility. As a pastor, I am bound by divine command to give my life for those whom I love. And that includes all Salvadorans, even those who are going to kill me. If they manage to carry out their threats, I shall be offering my blood for the redemption and resurrection of El Salvador. That's power, isn't it? That's not fear or anxiety anymore. That's, 5 and 6s can live in their heads. They can withdraw, observe. They can feel fear and anxiety in engaging with the outside world, and it works itself out in different ways. But both 5 and 6s, like Oscar Romero, can use their powers of observation to see things as they really are and then decide, I'm not going to act in fear. I know what the right course of action is, and I'm going to do it. And when they do, it changes the world. And so if you're a 5 or a 6 and you're kind of struggling with this engagement, that is possible for a 5 or a 6. And it may be that God is calling you to use your powers, your gifts, to engage with this world and like the incarnation and make this world more as it should be.